Well, good evening. I want to give you an update here on the very latest thinking with Florence. Of course, yesterday a major hurricane, today a fairly weak hurricane, but it is likely to change in the future. This is Africa, North America, South America, again, like yesterday, literally smack dab in the middle of those three major continents. Zooming in, though, it doesn't look anything like it did yesterday. Yesterday was a perfect donut or a bagel with round, very good symmetry to it, and right in the middle was a visible eye. Then late last night, early this morning, the eye started to disappear, and now way over here on the left-hand side, almost out from under in the area blue is, believe it or not, is the center of the storm. It is really, really far over. Now, I want to talk about the water temperatures. This is a look at the eye, by the way, is right about in here. Yesterday, the storm unexpectedly strengthened. One of the reasons why we thought it would not was some cooler water temperatures. They were a little warmer than 78, 79, 80, like is shown here. It cooled off some in the wake of the storm as it churned up some cooler water, what's called upwelling. But still, it was sort of borderline yesterday. The main thing was we thought the wind shear, which has killed it today, or really weakened it, would do the same thing yesterday, but it did not. And we think there was just a little pocket of sort of clear air that wasn't as dry that maybe it hit. And because of its small size, it was able to stay inside that little envelope where there wasn't a whole lot of wind. Anyway, now that it is weakened because of the wind sort of ripping it apart, now we turn our attention to what happens in the future. Typically, when you get into the mid-80s is when storms really start to crank up, assuming, again, there's not a lot of other change with the wind whipping it apart or whatever. So that's the bad news. The water temperatures really heat up as it gets up here toward areas of the East Coast. So the current thinking is that it will sort of hold its own for a day or so and then gradually start to increase again. And by 5 days from now, so we have a long time to figure this thing out. 5 days from now, it'll be just south of Bermuda and continuing then a trek where? Well, anywhere between due west and northeast, because this is the range of the models, and it's 1,300 and some miles across from the southernmost to the northernmost one. What is most likely to happen? Well, here's the best computer model over the past several years. Now, remember, 5 days out, it still has a pretty significant margin of error. It's hard to see, but right near the O in Norfolk, there's a thin gold line. That is when they run this one time. This is the Euro or the ECMWF run. One time, that's where they got it. Then they reran it 51 times, and it showed up with all of these different ones. You average those all together, and you get the darker, thicker line here. That brings it pretty close, but does keep it offshore. That would be, relatively bad for Hampton Roads, but would not be a worst case scenario. It would be just bad. It would not be, again, nearly as bad as if it makes landfall near us. At the same time, when they run the GFS model one time, you get this red line, stays at least 150 miles offshore. And the consensus, or the ensemble prediction, is the blue line that goes about over Bermuda and then turns it sharply to the east. Another thing we like to look at, the chance that a storm will hit us based on history or climatology. Just like you can say it's going to be warmer in the summer, that's climatology, but you can't predict on which day it'll be 105 ahead of time. So that's why this is used somewhat with the caveat that it doesn't tell you the whole story. But when we run this today, any storm that's been within 200 miles of where Florence is now, there has never been a storm to hit the East Coast other than around Miami. And that was a tropical depression number 4, not a tropical storm. A weak storm can still get steered along a little more, by the surface wind than the upper level wind. So we've never had a tropical storm or a hurricane actually hit the East Coast from this position. However, if we can come back to me, I want to talk about how that doesn't necessarily mean that this storm will miss us. When we ran this same exact setup yesterday with a storm back down in here, we got only one storm that had ever hit the East Coast, and that was Isabel. Hit directly here in Hampton Roads, came right up into eastern North Carolina and eastern Virginia. So when we ran this before Isabel hit, it looked like this. And I remember at the time saying, now, You can see a storm that's where Isabel is has never hit the East Coast, but we think this one is likely to hit the East Coast. A week ahead of time, we really had a very good handle on Isabel because the upper level winds in the system just never varied. Whereas this system, it's whether a cold front comes in and picks it up or not, and so things are really changing. So the fact that one has never hit from that position really doesn't tell us a whole lot, because we know that things are a little different in the upper atmosphere with this one. So we'll just have to wait and see. And here's why we have to wait. This is the European model. This is not exact, but it shows you in general, the bluish sort of purple area is basically a cold front. That's why, by the way, we're going to cool off a little bit over the weekend, is this weak cold front coming in from the mountains. However, I want to show you, here we go with the storm. We take it on through here and see this cold front to the north. It never gets close enough to pick up this storm and bring it to the north. So it just keeps heading up toward that ridge and eventually works its way right over Hampton Roads before coming out. That is the European model. The difference between it and the American model, the GFS model, look, as we put this one into motion, what happens. Notice how much closer that blue area got. That got very close to it. So even though it's only for a day or so, it pulls the storm north for a day or two, and that just sets it up more for an impact maybe across areas north of us like New York or New England. So that's the big difference going on with this storm and one model versus another. It'll take us at least another couple of days to really get a handle on where this storm might go, and then another day or two after that. We will give you plenty of advance warning. I don't expect any major changes until at least Sunday and maybe even Monday in what we're expecting and the sort of narrowing the path around here. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Again, make your plans now. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Thanks for watching.